Hey, how's it going, YouTube? This your boy Barlow B Theorizing, aka Barlow Slays, aka Barlow Nan, otherwise known as the Demon Hunter King Kaido himself sent to Azeroth. I don't know how I feel about that one. Let me know. What do you guys think? Is that a solid introduction or can I do better? Anyway, uh, I wanted to talk about a couple different things. I think I'm gonna get a couple videos ready. I don't know if they're both gonna drop today, but I am gonna get this one uploaded for sure. This is it's not a fandom I'm deeply involved with or familiar with, but it is one I've been getting a lot more into lately. A very close friend of mine on Discord is a big fan of the universe. She's always talking to me, telling me stuff. My real life best friend is also a mega DC nerd. Like, my boy's got a tattoo of the Flash. Dude is always chopping it up. He actually got me into the CW series, The Flash. So the first video, the one I'm gonna for sure make sure I get uploaded today, is gonna be a quick DC conversation. I have some thoughts on this chapter 1 phase 1 new DCU stuff going on, and the second video, I don't know if I'm gonna do it, get it uploaded today, or if I'm gonna wait, get that one uploaded tomorrow or the day after. But the second video is going to be that promised World of Warcraft video I've been talking about. I saw a post that has the time frame for the launch of the expansion as still well over a month out, and there's already spoilers available all over the internet. I did a little bit of digging, saw that Wowhead itself has an article on some of the stuff I'd like to talk about. So I think with that one, I'm just gonna put a spoiler tag or something in the thumbnail or the title of the video. But I really want to talk about that one because it's something that's been on my mind for, oh good God, what, 6, 8 months, 9 months now, going on pretty much since the launch of patch 11.0 in World of Warcraft. So I've been really excited to talk about that one for a while. So I will be getting that one uploaded before the promised time alongside patch 11.2. But just so you have a little bit of reference, that's why. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and slide on into our DC Comics / new DCU James Gunn led era, because man, to be fully upfront, I still haven't had a chance to go see Superman myself. But like I said, I've got a lot of friends. Actually, that's a lie. I don't have a lot of friends. I really don't like people. But a lot of the friends I do have, big DC fans, love to talk about this stuff. And because of that, it's got my theory juices rolling. And there's some things I've kind of noticed. Now, I do want to preface it again by saying I apologize if there's already a creator who's kind of pitched these ideas or had these thoughts. I'm not active in the DC sphere online. I think there's a page I follow on Tumblr that likes to talk about the Bat Family, but outside that, most of my knowledge with DC Comics, DCEU, and the new DCU is just from talking to my friends and doing reading, doing research, doing what I do best, just looking stuff up, learning something new every day. And one of the things I noticed is the title of chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, as well as the spread of confirmed projects, I guess, because they're not all TV shows. A lot of them are TV shows, but I don't think Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is going to be a TV show. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the next movie being released in the DCU. I am going to make a reference to something James Gunn has supposedly said because it does fit into the theory. I will take some time, do my digging, my research thing, see if I can come up with a screenshot of the post I'm going to reference. But just so you guys have that heads up, I will point out which part is this kind of unknown quantity that I'm taking at face value from other people. But Gods and Monsters is a pretty cool name, honestly, because that's kind of always been, from my understanding, the theme of the DC comics is, you got these godly powered superheroes, minus Bruce. I love that relation between Marvel and DC. But anyway, you got Superman, you got Supergirl, you got the Lanterns, you got the Flash, Wonder Woman, Dr. Manhattan. You just got these godly powered heroes, right? And then 9 times out of 10 their villains are just average Joe who's pissed about something that they did, or average Joe who got in contact with aliens and got access to a monster army. So it's a really cool theoretical spot to begin a new DCU at, because it's just establishing the base of what makes the comics great. And a lot of it promises a darker storyline, which I've always seen as the difference between Marvel and DC. DC has never been scared to delve into those darker topics, the darker arcs. Now, admittedly, Marvel does every now and then, but they're not as known. I call DC Comics dark comics. Have no idea what DC legitimately stands for. I'll probably, look it up and post it right here. But, I'd always refer to them as dark comics because to me that's what they were, at least in comparison to the story of hope that the X-Men always gave me when I was a kid, as that was one of the first comic book franchises I got involved with. My grandpa had a massive comic book collection, and whenever I'd go visit him and my grandma, he'd always bust them out. We'd read some comics. Pretty sure he had Hot Wheels models. Classic 90s kids growing up, hanging out with the parents and grandparents stuff. Back before we had internet and every game console under the sun, it was you go outside, play with sticks. You try and find out one that looks like a bad sword or the one that looks like a little pistole, and you just LARPed basically. It was you make up some kind of story to entertain yourself and your friends. But a lot of grandparents and parents back then, they loved doing the models with the kids, and I have a lot of good memories with my pops and my grandpa with model cars and model planes and stuff. Yeah, maybe a lot's an exaggeration, but I got some good ones. When I talk about it, they come to mind, and it makes me smile, obviously. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, the comics. X-Men was always so hopeful and bright. Yeah, you had Wolverine, this edgelord, bad dude with the snicked and the metallic claws. Sorry, I'm kind of geeking out in my head as I'm talking about it. But in comparison, what had always kind of been pushed when I was growing up, obviously, we had the Justice League. There was, I'm pretty sure, a Superman cartoon. I never watched it, but I do remember watching Batman the Animated Series and then Batman the Brave and the Bold as a kid. And, in comparison to the X-Men, Batman was dark. And that was really my introduction back in the day to DC. So it wasn't something that resonated with me personally. My friend on Discord, I'm not going to go into it because she's a big fan of Batman, but I've had some conversations. I'm not the biggest Batman fan, I'll just leave it at that, but I have heard this Superman movie is bright, it's hopeful, it is an uplifting story. Not even to mention anything about the fact it's supposed to be an immigrant story or whatever. And that, I really like that because, don't get me wrong, Henry Cavill was awesome. That suit he had was edgy, it was, forward. But I really liked, I read an article talking about James Gunn and David Cornsweet got to talking about trying to do the Superman suit. And they at some point in the conversation realized, you know what, the S and the red underwear, it was intentional, it was a design choice, and I really liked that they brought it back and leaned into that. But gods and monsters, right? So obviously we've introduced a god in the form of Superman. Now this is the point I'm going to reference. I have heard, and like I said, if I do find an article, I'll post some right here. But I've heard that even though the 2023 Blue Beetle movie is outside of the new DCU, let me see if I can edit that out. Even though the Blue Beetle movie is outside the new DCU, I have read that James Gunn still considers that version of Jaime Reyes to be the first hero in his DCU, to the point we're supposed to be getting an animated Blue Beetle series that's kind of a follow-up on that movie. Which, I got to thinking, okay, so we already know that Lanterns is, to my understanding, supposed to be the next project that's releasing under the DC flagship. And, the story of Hal and John, how it's set up, we got to kind of figure that it's going to be veteran Hal training the newcomer and John Stewart. Now, how Guy fits into all that, because maybe it's just how he was introduced and how people talk about it to me. But I had always been under the impression that Guy Gardner was the third Green Lantern, so after Hal Jordan and John Stewart. But then I was watching a shorter something yesterday talking about some of the Green Lanterns, and they mentioned that Guy Gardner was actually chosen as a backup to Hal Jordan. So I am a little confused on the finer details of the Green Lantern lore and all that. But as you can see back there, me and my buddy, big fans of the Lantern Corps. So we're both really excited for that one as well. And then it hit me because I recently started watching some of the old animated series. Honestly, I also, we got up to season 6 of The Flash. That Crisis event on the CW show should have never happened. Honestly, if you guys want to forget about it, I am down to forget that ever happened. That was god awful. Oh man, I'm not even sure there was an aspect of that version of the Crisis story that I enjoyed. Now, I haven't read any of the Crisis arcs in the comic books, just a lot of research. And then I did watch what did they call it? The old DCEU Tomorrowverse, I believe, was the name of the animated universe they were building. Didn't realize that had so many movies. That was really cool to see. But I remember the 3-part Crisis on Infinite Earths animated event, because it was releasing right around the time James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios, and it was a title that they were like, okay, no, at least from what I've heard, they were like, no, okay, this is the end of your guys' story, go ahead and do it. we're not gonna hold you back. Finish up your story, but then it's over. The Tomorrowverse is done with the Crisis on Infinite Earth 3-parter. And that was a beautiful story. Like, I'm not sure how accurate to the comics it was. My real life buddy, he was raving right alongside me with it, so I'd like to believe it was relatively accurate at least. Now, that was a beautiful version of Crisis. But because I really enjoyed, at least the first 5 seasons of The Flash on the CW, and then the Crisis on Infinite Earth animated movies, I started watching some more of the other DCEU titles, I guess. Aquaman was alright. Blue Beetle is... I'm hoping it can be handled better. But the fact that Blue Beetle is identified, Jaime Reyes specifically as Blue Beetle, was identified as the first hero in James Gunn's DCU, and then we're also getting a heavy emphasis on the Green Lantern Corps. It got me thinking, because when I was watching Young Justice, I did some research, because something about the little arc with Blue Beetle, Green Beetle, I can't remember what the other one was. There were 3 of them though, and then Black Beetle as the bad guy. I did a little bit of research, because some of that plot line kind of confused me. And come to find out, I guess, please correct me if I'm wrong, but come to find out, the Scarabs were actually created by an alien race with the intent of rivaling the Scarab, or Lanterns. So, in theory, we could call the Lanterns and the Scarabs opposites, nemesis, rivals, whatever you decide to call them, whatever you personally call them, they were intended to fight. And, a lot of people describe the powers of the Lantern Corps as these godly powers, right? And a lot of Scarabs end up becoming very beastly. So is chapter 1 going to be a story about the Lanterns and the Scarabs fighting? Because we have a lot of references to cosmic stuff going on in chapter 1, right? Superman, admittedly, I don't think any of that happened in space. There was mention of a black hole or something. I'm not sure, but there was also mention of a Hadron Collider, I believe. So that black hole very well could have been formed on the surface of Earth. We're not going to go into the scientific of that happening, because that is a terrifying thought. But, as far as I know, most of Superman is Earthbound. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, could end up introducing a space angle. What else did we have? Oh, man. Booster Gold, Waller, Creature Commando Season 2, Peacemaker Season 2. I feel like I'm forgetting some. Lanterns, Blue Beetle, Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, Waller. I don't know, there were 8 of them. But, like, the titles themselves, I guess Wonder or Superwoman. Oh, Themyscira, that's right. We're getting a backstory for Themyscira. That's really cool. I never think about Wonder Woman's home pre-Wonder Woman. That should be pretty cool to see. But I don't know. I'm kind of working on this theory that because, James Gunn said he wants to get away from Batman and Superman for a while. He doesn't want them to be the anchor of his DCU yet. Like, what is another good story to tell? And I personally feel like the Lanterns versus the Scarabs would be a pretty nice intro, because there's a lot of angles that could take. Is Hal going to be a god or a monster? Obviously making a reference to Parallax there. And because Lanterns is involving an older Hal Jordan and a younger John Stewart, and a notable lack of Barry Allen. Now that could just be because of the Flash and Ezra Miller and all that, but nothing involving Barry Allen or the Flash has been announced yet. And Barry is Hal's best friend. Could we be looking at a universe? I'm gonna pitch not post-crisis, because we know Kara's gonna be there, and as far as I'm aware, in the Crisis event, Barry and Kara are supposed to die. It's how the heroes win, reset on the universe, all that. So because Kara is gonna be present, I am ruling out the possibility of a post-crisis event. But could we be looking at a post-Parallax event? Could we be looking at a version of the DCU where the Flashpoint paradoxes happened and maybe the Flash just isn't a thing? Like maybe Jay was never around, although I do think I remember seeing there was a mural or something in the Superman movie that made reference to some of the older heroes, and it did appear like Jay Garrick was one of them. But that's Jay. And, most of the Flashpoint stories I'm aware of involve Barry. So, I don't know. Is there something here? Is there a possibility that we're looking at a DCU that is post-Paradox? Because a lack of Barry means that Hal is, I don't want to say doomed, I don't want to say certain, but it creates an environment where one thing goes wrong in Lanterns, one thing goes wrong in the Blue Beetle animated series that involves a lantern. We could be looking at Hal going full Parallax. And I think that'd be cool, because then we're, looking at the possibility of introducing Kyle Rayner, who, I don't know, maybe it's just because of a recent Death Battle video I watched, but really cool character, the pinnacle of the Lantern Corps. I mean, dude even created his own Lantern Corps because of the power he obtained. So, seeing something like that in my mind would give reason behind Superman and Batman not being the focus. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. This is going on 23 minutes. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Are we looking at a post-crisis universe where Kara has already been resurrected somehow? Because that did happen in the comics as well. Supergirl was kind of flopping around after the crisis, and DC decided to resurrect Kara because, I don't know, that's just solidarity, I guess. Or do you think it's possible we're looking not at post-crisis, but at post-Paradox? Now, as I said at the beginning, I'm still relatively new to the DC fandom. Definitely grew up a Marvel fan, but a lot of their stories I'm finding are super interesting, and I'm loving diving into them. So if I missed anything, if I messed up any facts, if I messed up any tiny details, please do let me know in the comments. If you'd rather come and yell at me on the Discord server, feel free to do that. I'll make sure to drop another link for that in the bio. And don't forget, check me out on X and Tumblr. I do post there every day. Respond when I get responses. So, if you reach out to me on any of these platforms, I will get back to you as well. I'd love to talk about this, get more information from maybe people who have more information. As I said, I've only got a couple friends who are really deep in this, and I've been leaning a lot on them. So please do give me your feedback. As always, though, friends, I hope you have a great day. Much love.